Morning everybody. Today, join the Housewives for coffee and a chat. So if that's something you think you'd like, keep watching. Well, morning everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm having a coffee. Welcome to another edition of the Sunday Sunshine Show. Now this is brought to you every Sunday morning at 7:30 by three YouTube friends, myself, Maria Crocker and Busy Bee Marie, who lives in Las Vegas. We call this the Sunday Sunshine Show and we call ourselves the Transatlantic Housewife because Marie lives across the Atlantic in Las Vegas. So let's get into this week's video. Now what we do is each week we cover a topic. We all cover the same topic, but we put our own slant on it. But this week what we thought we'd do is we'd ask you to join us for a coffee and a chat. So we may chat about different things. I've decided to chat about things I remember as a child, and I think Maria might be doing that as well. But anyway, let's get into the video. So let me just have a quick slurp. In my Paris mug. I've never been to Paris. Right, well, my childhood was a lot earlier than the other two's because obviously I'm nearly 76, so I'm talking about 60-70 years ago. So things have changed a lot since then. But my earliest memory, I was trying to think what my earliest memory was, and I think it was the Queen's coronation. I'd probably be about 3 at the time. But I do remember the street party. They had a street party. I used to live, when I was a child, I lived in Halifax in West Yorkshire. Well, we used to call it West Riding, but I think they've got rid of the Ridings now, haven't they? Not to Yorkshire people. So I lived in Halifax with my mum and dad and my brother, who was 6 years younger than me, but obviously he didn't come along until I was 6. And we used to live with my granddad, which was my dad's father, and we lived in an end terraced house. We didn't sort of have a garden. It was just like a backyard, if you would, and then it was straight on the street at the front. And in those days, the roads weren't made up. They weren't tarmacked or anything, you know. There was pavements though, and cobbles at the back. And we did have a bathroom, but a lot of the houses didn't have bathrooms. They had outside toilets. Which all my friends, when I went to their houses, they had outside. I don't know why we had a bathroom. I've no idea. But we did. So whether it had one when we moved in, I don't know. So anyway, my earliest memory, as I say, was the coronation, because we had a street party, and I do remember that. It was like you see on the TV, all down the middle of the street, long tables and bunting and what have you. And then every child got, I think from the council, we got a spoon with the Queen's head on. I don't know where that spoon is. I had it for years, you know, we used to have it for years, but I've no idea where it is now. But every child in Halifax got one of these spoons. Anyway, I always remember it rained and my mum made me come home, but I was a bit annoyed because a lot of them went back to one house, but my mum wouldn't let me go. I had to go home. And also I remember as a child, well, my nana, let me tell you a bit about my nana. My nana lived about, I wouldn't say 10 minutes walk away, not a long way. This was my mum's parents and my nana and granddad, and then my great-granddad lived with them as well. They seemed to do that in those days. And I used to sleep at my nana's every weekend, and I used to go every Wednesday for my lunch from school, because she always made, because my nana, I mean, she used to get up in the morning and the first thing she did was start cooking the dinner, apart from making my granddad's breakfast. And he always had bacon sandwich. Well, he always had porridge and then bacon sandwiches every morning, every single morning. And then my nana would start making the dinner, what they call dinner time, because they used to call what we call lunch dinner, and they had the main meal then. And so she'd start doing that, and then after dinner she would always get washed and get changed and put her pearls on, you know. She was a lovely lady. I adored my nana. She was one of 20 children. Her father was a miner and there was 20 of them. Can you believe it? 20 children. But she said they were never all home at once because I'm probably going back a century now. She said they were never all home at once. When they got to 13, they went into service, you know, well, my nana went to work at a hospital as, she ended up being the matron's maid. And my nana had impeccable manners, you know. She would never drink out of a beaker. It was always a cup and saucer. You know, her table manners were impeccable. Whether it was because she was the matron's maid, because in those days the matron was like, well, like God, you know, the matron. And my granddad used to be a hospital porter, but he ended up being this big consultant at the hospital. He was called Dr. Henry, I always remember, because in those days, I suppose it was like a cottage hospital, and he was his chauffeur. And so I suppose that's how my nana and granddad met, really, at the hospital. I presume it is, I don't really know. But then my granddad set up his own taxi business. He was, at the time, he was the only taxi in Halifax. And I remember he used to wear a cap, you know, like chauffeurs wear. He used to wear a cap, and then at weekends he used to put all silk sheets. Well, I don't say they were silk, but he used to put sheets all over the covers, all over the seats in the car, you know, covered them up with white sheets. And then it put a few artificial flowers in the back, and that was the wedding car for the weekend. But, you know, people used to hire him to go on holiday. I remember he took a couple of families on holiday, and he said, well, they weren't families, it was couples, you know, but he stayed with them all week and drove them around. You know, you just wouldn't hear of that nowadays, would you? But there wasn't many people had cars in those days, so it was unusual to have a car. In fact, my nana and granddad did have a telephone. I mean, they only lived in a 2-up, 2-down terrace, and their bathroom, their toilet was outside at the bottom of the yard. But having said that, it was quite a big house. It had a really big cellar, and in the cellar there was an old-fashioned, you know, one of the black old-fashioned fireplaces. And then there was an old bath, but I don't know what the bath was all about, because they never had any hot water and they didn't have a bathroom. So it never ever got used, the bath. You know, I don't know why they had a bath down there. And then there used to be like like a grate at the top where the coal man they used to deliver the coal, and it used to go down this chute into the cellar where they got the coal for the fires. But then years after, they made Halifax a smokeless zone. I mean, it's a beautiful city, town. It's a beautiful town, Halifax. You know, if you ever go, it's got the only peace hall in the country, the remaining peace hall. And the peace hall, it's like, it's a beautiful, well, it's not really a building. You go in through these gates, and the beautiful gates, they've got John the Baptist on the gate, which I think is in the coat of arms of Halifax. And it's it's like a big arena, if you would, and all round is little shops, like 2-tier little shops, and they call it the Peace Hall because in those days, all the farmers used to bring the pieces of cloth down from the farms where they made the cloth, and they used to show their pieces in these little rooms, and that's why it's called the Peace Hall. It's Piece, not Peace. Now they have lots of events on there as well. It's a beautiful to go. Oh, you know, I can just see a squirrel in the tree. We do have quite a few squirrels around here, so it's just running down here. If he comes near, I'll film him. I'm digressing again. I'm going off at a tangent. So then when I got to about, I was 10 or 11, we moved to Blackpool from Halifax. Well, Bispham, near Blackpool. I had an auntie who lived here, and we used to come and stay for the summer. Well, it was my mum's best friend. We often used to come for a couple of weeks for our holidays and stay with her. And sometimes, I mean, when you think about it, you wouldn't do it nowadays. But I can remember I'd only about 8 or 9, and my mum would put me on the bus in Halifax, and then I'd get off it in Blackpool, and my auntie would be waiting for me at the station in Blackpool. You never do that nowadays, would you? But times are so different. Oh, and I remember the bus journey. It was awful. I always felt sick because it always smelt of petrol and cigarettes because people could smoke on the buses. It was awful, really. But then, as I say, when I got to about 11, well, I was 11, we moved here to Bispham near Blackpool. And we were only here, we were here about 9 months, and then my dad died, sadly. And everyone thought my mum would go back to Halifax, but she never did. I mean, it must have been a struggle for her because there wasn't all the benefits in those days. And I do remember her working 3 jobs, you know, because we had a mortgage and she didn't have insurance. They didn't have insurance. And I remember she used to do breakfast at a hotel, and then she used to work at a sweet shop in an afternoon. And then at night, she used to work at Symbol Biscuits. It must have been so hard for her. You know, well, I suppose it was hard for all of us, really, but times have changed, haven't they? You know, there's a lot more benefits available now for people in those situations. So we stayed in this area, and then I got married in this area, and we've stayed here. My brother stayed here, so we've never gone. Well, we did used to go back to Halifax. I used to go a lot. Excuse me, because like I said, my nana was one of 20, but only 12 lived to adulthood, which my nana always used to say, well, there wasn't room anyway. I mean, it's awful, really, but only 12 lived, but it's still a lot, 12. And out of those 12, not many of them had children. So when we went back to Halifax, our time was taken up by going round seeing all the great aunties, mainly aunties. There was only a couple of, there were mainly girls, there was only a couple of boys. And they used to, you know, if we visited one, we had to visit them all because they all got jealous. So it was awful, but it was good memories, you know. I've good memories of them. Times have changed so much now, haven't they? Anyway, I seem to have just been telling you about my nana and all that, but I'm sure it's interesting. I think it is. I hope you find it interesting. So I hope you've enjoyed our little chat. And pop across to Busy Bee Marie's channel and Maria Crocker and see what their chat's all about. I'll have another drink of coffee. I hope you're enjoying your coffee. So, thank you so much for watching. I think I've prattled on long enough. So, I'll see you next Sunday for the Sunday Sunshine Show. We haven't planned what we're doing yet, which is unusual because we usually do. But I will see you next Sunday, but I'll see you in the week before then. So, thank you so much for watching. And if you're not subscribed and you'd like to, I'd love you to subscribe to all our channels. So, thank you for watching and bye.